If you've ever seen the musical Wicked, you know the story. Glinda the Good, Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West. It's, this huge spectacle.
It is. Green skin, flying monkeys, all of it.
All of it. But today, we're looking at it through a really different lens. We found this incredible academic analysis that argues that beneath all that fantasy is a sharp, almost point-by-point blueprint for how real-world political oppression actually works.
Exactly. We're going to take a deep dive into how the Land of Oz in this view mirrors some really profound historical conflicts. The source we're using, it challenges us to see the entire political system of Oz.
The Wizard's regime.
Yeah, the Wizard's regime, as a kind of perfect allegory for how power structures use fear, propaganda, and maybe most importantly, legalize dehumanization to stay in control.
And our mission here is to sort of unpack those complex ideas for you. We're trying to look past the spectacle to see how the story reflects actual systems of oppression. And the analysis draws these really specific parallels to slavery, Jim Crow, and even like the economic machinery behind colonialism and modern political fights.
It's definitely intense material, but the essay lays it out really clearly. We'll follow its logic. So, first, how systemic exclusion gets started.
Okay.
Second, how propaganda is used to deflect economic blame. And then finally, what the story says about the real source of power and change, both in Oz and, well, in our world.
So where do we start?
I think we have to start with the foundation of any oppressive system, defining who counts as a person and who doesn't.
Let's talk about the animals then, because it's a detail that's really easy to miss. But the whole political shift in Oz starts when the talking, intelligent animals like Dr. Dillamon the goat start losing their rights.
Yes. That idea of legalized dehumanization is the very first step. It's the move that allows the Wizard's regime to take hold.
And that's where the historical parallel just becomes so stark.
It really does. The systemic exclusion and disenfranchisement of the animals.
Yeah.
Suddenly they're banned from teaching or speaking or even going into certain places. It directly mirrors the first phases of segregation and slavery in the U.S.
Okay, let's unpack this a little. The analysis makes it super clear that oppression isn't just about, personal meanness.
No, it has to be official.
It has to be written down in law. Just like enslaved Africans were legally defined as less than human through slave codes and later Jim Crow laws, the Wizard's government uses actual legislation to just erase the animal status.
It's a mechanism. It gives the state the official permission it needs to take away rights and dignity.
And you see it in the simplest visual cues in the show.
Oh, absolutely. Think about those signs that suddenly pop up everywhere.
No animals.
No animals. The essay argues that those signs are a deliberate echo of historical exclusion. The whites-only signs that were all about reinforcing who was a full member of society and who was, being pushed out of public life.
A sign becomes a weapon.
A weapon of control, exactly.
It's terrifyingly efficient. But for it to work, the rest of the population has to buy into it. It's not just the oppressors, right?
Right. And that's where the allegory kind of pivots from the political system to the psychological.
So it moves into internalized prejudice.
Exactly. The analysis uses Glinda's first reaction to Elphaba's green skin.
Yeah.
That visceral disgust, the immediate revulsion.
She literally recoils.
She does. And the argument is that this is a classic example of learned bias. Glinda isn't born evil. She's just reacting the way her society has programmed her to.
And that idea that disgust is conditioned, not natural, that's a really powerful thought.
It is.
If you take away one thing from this section, it's this. The essay, and it cites psychological research here, suggests that being near something society has labeled as other, it doesn't trigger rational fear. It triggers a socially conditioned disgust, a gut reaction.
A gut reaction programmed by the culture, not by your own reasoned thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's the genius of the allegory. Shows the whole oppressive machine doesn't just need the wizard making laws.
It needs Glinda.
It needs Glinda and everyone else to adopt that bias so completely that they actually believe the lie, that Elphaba is wicked just because she's green or just because she defends the animals. And once that prejudice is baked into the culture, the regime can move on to its next phase.
Full-blown political misdirection.
Okay, so moving from that personal fear to the bigger political stage, this is where the Wizard's whole strategy really starts to make sense.
Right. The analysis points out that the system has to distract everyone from its own failures, from its own corruption.
It needs a diversion.
It needs a diversion. And Elphaba herself says the key line, the one that basically sums up the entire strategy. She says, they need someone to blame.
And that's the blueprint, isn't it? The exact blueprint for political scapegoating throughout history.
It is. Here's where it gets really interesting. The analysis draws a direct line from Oz to Nazi Germany.
Okay.
The Nazi regime, initially, it wasn't an economic success. The state was failing. So when the economy collapsed, what did they do? They shifted all the blame onto Jewish communities. So it takes the public's anger.
And it deflects it away from the failures of the leadership, and it channels it, focuses it onto a manufactured enemy.
And that mechanism it's timeless.
It's absolutely timeless. The sources show how it's still used today. You see this contemporary political strategy of blaming vulnerable groups, like, say, immigrants, for things like unemployment or low wages.
Right, that's a common one.
A very common one. But the evidence, the economic data, it strongly suggests that the real cause of wage suppression isn't the immigrant population. It's things like the huge concentration of wealth at the very top and, deliberate policy choices.
So it's the perfect misdirection. Get everyone to focus on the green girl and the talking animals.
Make them hate the other.
And then nobody's paying attention to the man behind the curtain who is failing to govern and hoarding all the power.
And the propaganda is what makes it all seem normal. It legitimizes the blame. It gives people a simple, satisfying story. Oz is suffering because of Elphaba, because of the animals, not because of the wizard.
It's an essential political technology for keeping an unjust system going.
Yeah, it is.
But, okay, if the wizard is just smoke and mirrors, what about the world itself? What about, the most iconic thing in Oz, the yellow brick road?
Well, the allegory goes right down to the ground they walk on, specifically the yellow brick road.
Mm-hmm.
The analysis argues that this road, which we see as this shining path to a glorious city,
the dream,
is actually a representation of infrastructure and wealth that was built by exploited, oppressed labor.
Wow. So it's the hidden cost of the fantasy?
It's the hidden systemic cost. And we're talking about really specific historical echoes here. The analysis points out that enslaved populations built the foundations of huge economic systems.
Not just plantations.
Not just plantations. They built the roads, the ports, the universities, the financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the wealth that exists in modern nations today is, quite literally paved with exploited labor.
And you have to expand that parallel to colonialism, too.
You do. The essay is clear on this. Colonial powers systematically extracted resources, timber, minerals, wealth, from colonized nations. And that process didn't just make the colonizers rich.
It destroyed the local economies.
It fundamentally destabilized them. It made sure that many of those regions are still struggling today to recover from that systemic theft. The shiny infrastructure of the colonizing nations often has its roots right there.
But none of this can work unless the average person either participates or, at the very least, just stays quiet.
Right. We can't only look at the wizard. We have to look at the bystanders.
Which brings us to the Munchkins.
That brings us to mass conformity, and the Munchkins are the symbol. Their enthusiastic, obedient acceptance of the propaganda is what makes the whole thing work.
They're so cheerful about it.
And the analysis draws a parallel there to these historical moments of intense conformity. It shows how propaganda successfully normalized really harmful ideas, like rising anti-Semitism, among ordinary citizens who, maybe just wanted to keep the peace.
They just wanted to fit in and not cause trouble.
Exactly. The second the wizard starts pushing his story, the Munchkins rush to believe it. It shows how social conformity, just going along with the narrative, is the grease that keeps the machine of injustice running.
It needs passive compliance just as much as it needs active oppression.
Which then raises a really important question. If the general population is so easily controlled, then who actually holds the power for real change?
And that question leads us to, I think, the final and most hopeful part of this analysis, this idea of the illusion of power versus the reality of power.
Yes. The essay draws a sharp contrast between two kinds of authority in Oz. On one hand, you have the wizard and, the early version of Glinda. They represent what the essay calls performative authority.
Meaning?
It's authority based on spectacle, on official titles, big speeches, projecting an image of being all-powerful, the giant booming voice, the smoke, the lights.
It looks like power.
It looks like they're in charge, but it's manufactured. It's fragile.
And then on the other side, there's Elphaba.
On the other side is Elphaba. She starts with zero official power. But she comes to embody what the essay calls moral and collective power.
So her strength doesn't come from a title.
No. It comes from the grassroots resistance she inspires, from the alliances she builds, from the moral clarity of her opposition to what's happening.
And this really reinforces the essay's main conclusion about history, doesn't it?
It does. It strongly argues that real historical change has consistently come from the bottom up. Not from official leaders, not from the people with the fancy titles and the big shows.
But from organized grassroots resistance.
That's where true societal leverage comes from.
So, at the end of the day, what does this all mean for someone watching the show? The essay's ultimate point is that Wicked is more than just a good time, it's a political challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's asking you to question the dominant narratives, the official stories you're told by people in power, and to recognize that the real source of political power is always with the collective will of the people, especially those who decide to resist.
So our deep dive into this analysis really shows that the story of Wicked can function as this brilliant, detailed map of systemic oppression.
Right.
It shows how power is built on legalized dehumanization, how it's held up by psychological bias, funded by economic exploitation, and, locked in place by mass conformity.
Which leaves us with a final, I think, very provocative thought for you to carry with you. If this analysis is right, if real power lies not in institutions or titles, but with people who actively resist injustice.
Even when society calls them deviant or dangerous.
Or, yes, wicked. Then it raises a really important question about how we identify wickedness in our own world and our own dominant narratives today.
The person who questions the system is often the first one the system tries to paint as a villain.
Keep questioning those narratives.
Keep exploring the allegories in the stories you love.
Yeah.
That's what this deep dive was all about.